From the Daily Reporter, this is Ethan Duran. Welcome to Brews and Blueprints, a podcast about construction and development across Wisconsin. Hi, I'm Ethan Duran of the Daily Reporter, and this is the Brews and Blueprints podcast. I'm sitting here with Joseph Scala, who worked in commercial sales and marketing for the construction industry and has been heavily involved with volunteerism throughout his life. He is also well known for singing the national anthem at more than 100 events each year, including one time for the Daily Reporter. Joseph is also the winner of the 2023 Outstanding Lifetime Philanthropy Award. Thanks for being here with us, Joseph.
I'm honored to be here. You and Joe and all the people at Daily Reporter have been amazing supporters, both of me personally and of a lot of causes important to me for a very long time. So I appreciate that introduction. Thank you.
And we're happy to be working with you as well. So we were just talking a little bit about your involvement on Veterans Day. What did you do? I know we're about a day after recording this, but what was that like? What did you do that day?
It's very timely that you asked because it's and very apropos, particularly as you mentioned the award in late 2023. Commander Dave Mix of the National VFW was actually my nominator for that. He's like a father figure to me. He's an American hero. I couldn't admire him more. But I've been a part of their Veterans Day dinner for many, many years, and that one is really amazing in a lot of ways. But it opens with the anthem, but I also sang "America the Beautiful" and "God Bless America" as part of that. So that is a huge event for me personally, and because of my involvement and honor and being involved with veterans. In addition to that, earlier in the day, the Fox Valley Veterans Council has a remembrance at the Outagamie County Courthouse that I've been, again, a part of for many years. And that one also is extremely special, both because of being involved with the people, but it's just a very grand venue in the lobby of the courthouse. The acoustics are amazing. It's one of, honestly, taking out the great honor of singing for Veterans Day and for veterans in general, it's one of the great venues where I sing just in terms of the sound quality and the acoustics. So, like I said, that's just a huge day for me. It's obviously a huge day for our country, and, I'm just honored to be a part of it.
That's great to hear. So I want to ask, how did you get your start? Well, first of all, what got you into singing? And then from there, I want to ask, how did you get into singing for events like this specifically?
The singing thing is a relatively easy answer. I'm the baby to 7 older siblings, 5 sisters. So when I was a child, literally when I was 5, 6, Eagles song, a James Taylor song would come on the radio, and I'd mimic them, and that just sort of became part of it. I'm completely self-taught. I don't read music, even though I've sung in some huge venues. UW Sports, some of the other very, very large venues. But I think that as a skilled amateur, I think that's sort of like a breath of fresh air I brought to that. It's interesting, when I sort of began being somewhat successful in my career, many times people would say that, you should, learn to read music, trade. And I think that would mess it up. I think that I'm not thinking about notes and words and things, but that's kind of how it all started. And it's been a part of my life, obviously, up until now. As far as being involved with some of the veterans organizations, it's just very, very organic. It all kind of started here in Wisconsin at a Wausau Chamber event. I sang at a game. They had their night there. And as is the case now with technology, someone recorded it and they shared it with someone and they shared it with someone. And, it started with just, hey, would you like to join us? Now it's really evolved into this very big thing. And see, it's interesting in terms of even translating to business. Those relationships, kind of like the ones we talked about with the National VFW, with the Fox Valley Veterans Council, are, part of my relationships for 10 plus years. And those are, I'm hopeful, barring father time taking its toll on my range or my might, I hope I'll do, honestly, till the day I die. Because like I said, those are relationships that I've been fortunate to build. Even in Metro Milwaukee, for instance, I've done 2 Chinooks games a year for the last 10 years. I've done a Timber Rattlers game pretty much every year for the last 10 years. So both military and even in some of the, for want of a better term, fun stuff, those are relationships that I've built and put the time into, much like I have, throughout my career in terms of calling on engineering firms, construction firms, mechanicals. Very, very similar, but much like it is the case, in business, without getting, too into sales theory. I mean, there are 2-day conferences just on that one topic, but that's how you build it. It's just, getting out there and talking with people and getting that exposure. And that exposure has resulted in being involved with some amazing groups.
Now, did the Daily Reporter find you from online, being online, or was it more of that sales relationship, as you mentioned earlier? Or was it a little bit of both?
It was primarily sales relationship. During that time in my career, I was calling, extensively on commercial construction, engineering, mechanicals, those type of folks. And I got to know Joe and many of the others from Daily Reporter and had attended several events. It was really just serendipity. Joe and I were talking and he said, oh, we're having this event. And I said, oh, and I just kind of offhand, I was kind of probably half kidding, offhandedly said, gosh, that'd be cool if you really opened that with the anthem. I'd be honored to be considered. And he's just like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's just do that. And that's kind of how that happened. And that's how so many of them happen. Obviously, the ones with organizations and games, it's a part of their program. But then there are others that have, even in completely unrelated things. Like I did one recently for Parkinson's Association. That, again, was just serendipity. It was not part of their program, but I knew the folks from some of the local chamber events. And they said, gosh, that would really be a great touch if we opened with the anthem. Would you like to come and do it? And of course, as long as I was available, I'm glad to do. So that's typically how they had that come about.
Let's talk a little bit about your involvement in volunteerism. I know you've had some life experiences, deep things with your family that sort of motivated you from very early on. Do you want to touch on that and tell us a little more about it?
I'd love to. I mean, obviously, I love talking about a lot of things, but one of the things I probably love talking about more than anything is family. As I said, I'm the baby to 7 older siblings who, I love very much, and have so much of this is based on coming from sort of a nurturing, supportive environment, even to this day. I do come from very humble beginnings. My parents were first-generation immigrants. We had very, very little. My father passed when I was a teenager. That's what sort of launched me into a lifelong commitment to the American Cancer Society. He was diagnosed when he was originally diagnosed, like most people. You start, kind of reading up on it, learning more about it, support events and things. And that sort of cast me into a lifelong commitment to that, which lasts to this day. I'm certainly honored that I remain, an ambassador for American Cancer Society. I was the 2020 Outstanding Fundraising Award winner for them. They've been a huge part of my life, and to this day. They also tie sort of back to the singing. I've sung at the Making Strides walks, just most recently the Fall Walk, but many of their events over the years. So that's kind of where it all started. The other element to where that started, kind of back to family is, my mother, I mean, obviously it's such a cliche as an Italian guy, but, I love my mother. I mean, my mother and my sisters have been a huge part of my life, and, both of my formative years and even to this day. And my mother, one of the things that she often said, and I find myself paraphrasing this almost every day of my life, is that, even if you don't have much, you share what you got. And that was something that she really instilled in me and carried throughout my life. Much later, in recent years, just over 10 years ago, my mother, she had quite the life. She lived to be 88. She raised 8 kids. I mean, she had, like I said, just an amazing life. But she did develop Alzheimer's late in her life. And much like it happened that all those years before with my father, when she was diagnosed, I started reading up on it. I started going to events to learn more, and connected with the Alzheimer's Association here in the Fox Valley. And over the last 10 plus years, I've been part of the committee for the Appleton Walk. I've sung for numerous walks. It's become a huge part of my life, and the people involved. So, to kind of tie a bow on that part of our conversation, that's kind of where it started. It kind of started with my father's diagnosis, and kind of continue through life with that sort of commitment to volunteerism, fostered in large part by family. And sort of as we get sort of more toward the present, the Alzheimer's Association sort of came into view with my mother's diagnosis, 10 plus years ago.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. This makes me think a little bit about, well, obviously we're a construction podcast, so we're going to get to questions like that. But I know, there are companies across Wisconsin who are, deeply involved in their community. For example, I know many are sponsors. I know we're a sponsor for the American Heart Association. I actually just did a story on a Wauwatosa plumbing company that donated some time and labor to a woman that needed help clearing clutter out of her house. Then now they have a national TV spot for it. Do you feel there is a connection between the construction industry and community service? And do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences with construction, with engineering industries, and volunteering simultaneously?
There's an absolute and strong connection that we're very, very fortunate to have both in the Fox Valley region, but also throughout the state. I mean, when you look at the Fox Valley, for instance, and I'm obviously going to leave out a lot of people, but so many come to mind. Some of the biggest, best companies in construction are also the most avid in volunteerism. I mean, when you think of Bolt, when you think of Myron, when you think of Bassett Mechanical, Tweet Garrett, I mean, in addition to these companies being national companies that are renowned for, their tremendous business successes, some of them are also equally renowned for their, their philanthropy, for their commitment to volunteerism, for the programs that they have with their employees. I mean, again, getting back to, we could talk about this for hours, but, when you think of like Bolt, I mean, just the legacy that O.C. Bolt, created and is still fostered, by their company. So, again, I think that the commitment to community of so many of the great companies in our state and this region is just amazing. Now, tying that back to, some of my professional involvement in calling on a lot of these companies, obviously it goes, first and foremost, we were working together on, a variety of projects. Engineering, I was doing a lot of lunch and learns with engineering firms, with construction companies. And, that was obviously always the primary focus. But I will also say that when you start talking about some of these things, it elevates you. I mean, you go from being, an HVAC guy or a product specification guy to, in addition to that, someone, committed to community that's in line with their values. And finally, on that note, study after study after study shows, and you can see this in looking at the websites of all of those companies that I mentioned and 50 that I didn't, community involvement, what we're about, are always shown time and time and time again as the most read sections of websites and the ones that get the most clicks, the strongest commitment, because people connect with that on a personal level. And I think that, as I said, I made a liar of myself to say I got to tie a bow on that part of the conversation. Many of these, customers and people I've called on have also become people that I've stood side by side with at walks and other events. So it's really been an incredible gift to be able to incorporate both those things, the professional element and the volunteer element, into working with, companies and individuals that I admire tremendously.
Well, I'm happy you shared that tidbit of information. Was the Daily Reporter the only construction entity you've sung for, or have you sung for any of these other companies as well?
I actually have sung at some ABC events as well. I mean, ABC, they are obviously closely aligned with a lot of your base as well, but I've had some involvement with them in the past, and also been fortunate, much like I've done with the Daily Reporter over time, is refer connections, friends, colleagues toward them who, would benefit from being involved with their group.
Anything you like to sing outside of, I know the national anthem is a big one. You mentioned a couple of others, but I think you mentioned the Eagles as well. But
yeah, well, it's interesting from a personal standpoint when I'm just, it's interesting when I practice 90% of my practice is probably in the car. It's, to me, it's like one of the most relaxing things. I was going to say hundreds of times, but probably thousands of times over the years, as you know, I've driven up to thousands of appointments. It's just very calming, that last 5 minutes to, you know, sing an Eagles song or James Taylor and just kind of get in a nice, calm space. There are two that immediately come to mind. In terms of mainstream music, I love Matchbox 20. Rob Thomas is right in my middle register. Phil Collins at Genesis is right in my middle register. So those are two I love. In addition to that, I mean, one other thing I guess I feel compelled to mention, so that I'm not a one-trick anthem pony. I do actually do some events with an accompanist. She's very talented. She's actually part of some of my volunteer groups, but we do a lot of classic songs that people love, Elton John, Frank Sinatra, standards, as well as, you know, some Eagles and all. So, you know, as I said, music's been a part of my life for a very long time, much like everyone, even people that don't necessarily sing. We're all exposed to music, and it sort of takes you back to periods in your life. And I'm kind of much like so many people. I mean, I love Guns N' Roses, but I love Frank Sinatra. You know, I like early Black Sabbath, but I like, you know, Andy Williams. I mean, so it just depends on, you know, one of the others genres that I just absolutely love, again, because it's formative years, is, you know, Temptations, Four Tops. That's sort of, you know, blues, classic, you know, soul music, you know, I grew up in a very mixed neighborhood. So that was something that I was exposed to also, you know, very early. So a pretty wide range, genreized into music. The other thing I'd add on the music side, again, as a sort of sales and marketing guy, I'm just as interested in the sales and marketing side of it as the performance side. I mean, even to this day, I'm always fascinated by, you know, what catches fire and what doesn't. You know, when you look at, say, one-hit wonders versus someone that's had, you know, a string of hits for 20 years, what lightning in a bottle did they catch that, you know, made them massively successful, and with someone else, you know, had them explode for a moment in time and then sort of disappear. I mean, that's actually just as interesting as the performance side to me.
I will say I'm very fascinated by the music industry as well. So, and I also want to mention, I feel like you speak for most of us when you talk about singing in the car. I was going to say the second best place is probably the shower as well. Mm-hmm. Whenever you feel relaxed, you just kind of feel like doing it.
Yeah.
But what's one of the, now, is the one-hit wonder phenomenon one of the most fascinating things in the music industry to you, or what's something you see going on in the music industry today that you just kind of like, wow, that's very fascinating?
Mm-hmm. I think music is really cool, and obviously you can tell. I mean, I love talking about it because I think a lot of it translates directly to business and sports and some of the other things, because it goes in cycles. You had, say, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, but you had, you know, sort of the virtuoso rock of the 70s, the Yes and Genesis. And then that sort of drifted into people just like, oh, well, that's too polished and that's too done. And that sort of evolved into punk, like anybody can do this. And then that sort of, you know, evolved into, you know, sort of glam metal. And then it was just like, those guys are lame. And that sort of evolved into grunge. So you see like sort of these processes that take, and it's much like, you know, in sports, let's just say, in sports, you know, teams will be really successful with nimble, small, wide receivers, and the defenses will try to catch up and say, oh, well, we need athletic, small corners and safeties to cover those guys. And then the offense says, oh, well, we're going to get big, strong guys to overwhelm it. And then the defense has to adjust. And I think music kind of does the same thing. I mean, that, to me, that's always the most interesting thing is, and I think it's the case with business as well, is that what's next? I think what's next is always what's most interesting. I think for all of us to be able to look back at, you know, a lot of, whether it's your podcasts or even things like in the news, to say, you know, say 5 years from now, what did people see coming, and, you know, what were they right about? And as far as like one last thing on that, I mean, with one hit wonders, I mean, I think that to me has always been fascinating, because you look at almost anything. I mean, again, we've seen it in sports as well. You know, guys that had this, you know, this massive success and then disappeared. Now, a lot of times in sports, it's because of injury or, you know, other issues. But then there's others that you just can't explain. And I think the one-hit wonder phenomenon is just an amazing thing, because invariably, again, in business and so many other things, people tend to emulate that which works. So you would think that if you were able to capture that, you'd be able to do it again. But so many times, I mean, there's certainly many more instances of people having that sort of lightning in a bottle than the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the U2s of this world that sustained it for years and years and years and years and years. And, interesting enough, that's the case with business as well. There are way, way more companies that failed than the bolts that have been around for 100 years or some of those other type of companies. I mean, I think it's a good lesson, for all of us in trying to, get your hands around, okay, what's successful and what's sustainable and what's not.
I find that fascinating as well as a business reporter doing this for only a few years, is not just the way companies might shape the rest of the world, but how the rest of the world affected by technology or companies end up shaping companies. I mean, I don't want to speak too openly because I haven't done all my reading on this, but just for an example, there's a news piece about redevelopment plans of a Walmart in the Milwaukee area. And it's like, well, those stores used to be known for, being these big boxes that kind of took up all the air from mom and pop shops. And now they're starting to close because of e-commerce or another million factors. So I agree with you on the idea of seeing these things work out in cycles, and it's always connected across, no matter what you want to talk about, whether it's music, sports, or business.
Technology is just amazing. I will also add that, again, as a person of a certain age, I mean, just the fascination that I had way back to my advertising days when we first got a fax machine. I mean, being able to transmit, ad layouts for, approvals and revisions without physically having to go to the customer. I mean, now we look at, things like that as just so second nature, but I think a lot of us live that. I mean, I was at an agency when we went from traditional mechanicals to desktop publishing, where literally on a Friday, they were doing, old-fashioned mechanicals at a drawing table, and Monday, all of those were gone. I mean, there's been some really amazing technological things, and those are way back. I mean, now, obviously, with regard to, phones, computers, I mean, that stuff changes every day. But seeing some of these things firsthand and being able to look back, I mean, I'm the first to admit, humbly that, again, I thought those things were like groundbreaking. And if you had told me in the 80s that, someday you were going to have this little handheld device that could contain all that information, I'd be like, get out of here. That's like 500 years away. That's like the Jetson, So it's really cool. It's really cool to see firsthand. I mean, and again, I think that's one of the things that I do try to enjoy in every aspect of my life, is to enjoy the journey, see what's going on, and reflect on what's happened, and try to, also look at what's happening moving forward.
Makes me wonder what technology is going to look like in the next 20 or 30 years and how that's going to affect us in every other way possible. Since we're on the subject, Joseph, do you have any of your music recorded? Can we find a CD or stream any of your singing?
I have a lot of live performances on YouTube. So if listeners search YouTube, there's a variety. A lot of anthems, a lot of God Bless America, a lot of America the Beautiful, and some, also mainstream music. The whole Accompanist thing is relatively new, but I'm sure that those will also be soon. But as I said, there are some that I've done at events. So, like I said, a simple YouTube search of me. My name is probably unique enough that simple YouTube searches will bring those up.
And if anyone wants to get connected with you about booking an event possibly, how should they reach out?
I'm very active on the primary social platforms. My Twitter handle is really easy, @ScalaJoseph. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. Certainly search me and reach out to me through direct message on any of the topics we talked about, whether it's if you think there are business opportunities together, professional opportunities, certainly volunteer opportunities, and, of course, singing and music opportunities. I'm always glad to, talk with people about.
Well, Joseph, I really appreciate you being on the show today. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I would just close by, again, kind of where we started. And I really do believe this just from a sales principle standpoint. I mean, I say some derivative of this almost every day, that I think every call, visit, biggest customer, smallest customer, everywhere in between should start and end with a thank you. And I'm just very appreciative of the chance today to talk with you about things that are important to me, and also all the support from Joe and all the people at Daily Reporter. They've been great advocates for me personally, and a lot of things very important to me. So again, just thank you to all of you.
Of course, we're happy to help. Thanks again, Joseph.